Okay. I'm not so good at following the progress. I used to just put out an English from
What?
It's a tremendous fuss because the OU has become such an incredible resource of communal harbatas Torah over the last few years. Basically, all of the Rabbanim's shiurim have been depleted because everybody is learning all daf in a very beautiful way. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but it's incredible. It's incredible, and in particular, everybody has like, who's your favorite Magid shir? Is it like the quick daf, or is it Rabbi Bornstein, or is it Rabbi Rosner, or is it Rabbi Leibowitz? Baruch Hashem. We have not too many Yiddish speakers here, so we're not handling in that. But and then the All Mishnah, and then the All Parsha, and just in general, the sense of finding the holes and being there for the people. Of course, NCSY. Of course, the Kosher. There's so much. And without a question, Rabbi Hauer is the voice that people and the thinker that people can relate to and connect with. And it's a very big schus that we have such a wonderful, vibrant organization that's run by such an incredible leader, a man in Israel. And we wish the Rav tremendous bracha and atzlacha, simcha nachas. And we know that there are many, many people listening, and they follow his words in a very beautiful way. You should be zocheh Be'ez Hashem to have continued hashpah for many, many years to come.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Brander. You should have great hatzlacha in this beautiful place. I know you have to leave. You should leave Gesundheit to circumcisions beyond his control. Go. And with mazel and hatzlacha. I want to note that the Space Medrash thinks of everything. Everything is meaningful and symbolic. There are two clocks in this room, one of them which the speaker sees and one of them which the audience sees. The one which the audience sees keeps moving. The one which the speaker sees stands still. That's perfect. It's accurate, no? Isn't that the way it works all the time? Okay. We're talking here a little bit about building resilient families. And I want to begin by sharing with you a medrash, a comment in the medrash which is such a beautiful and elegant framing of this issue, and specifically something to think about as we approach the Chag, the Yom Tov of conversation between family members, between parents and children, the Yom Tov which is built around V'higadata Levincha. The Medrash says that when Hashem first appeared to Moshe Rabbeinu to begin the process of taking the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, so he appeared to him at the burning bush. And Moshe Rabbeinu was walking through the desert, and he sees the burning bush, and he goes to go and look and to see what's what. And a voice comes out to call Moshe Rabbeinu, to gain Moshe Rabbeinu's attention. Am Rabbi Yeshua Kohen Bar Nechemia b'shor shenila HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Moshe tirun hoya Moshe l'nevuah. When Hashem appeared to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu was a novice at prophecy. What am I going to do? Moshe Rabbeinu hasn't had prophecy before. How do I first appear to him? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, im nigla ani yolav b'kol gadol ani mevaso. If I appear to him in a big loud voice, I'll scare him. B'kol namach, if I appear to him in a very soft voice, boser hu al hanavua, he'll just walk past it. He won't pay attention to it. What voice should I use? that won't scare him away, or that won't be too modest, too soft, that he will ignore? How do I strike the perfect balance? Me'asa nigla alav b'kolo shel aviv. He appeared to him with the voice of his father. And the voice of the father, the voice of the parent, is supposed to strike the perfect balance. A voice that won't be ignored, and a voice that won't scare off. And so he appeared to him. The Medrash gets it from the fact, Anochi Elokei Avicha. The first thing is, I'm the God of your father, the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He said, you're the voice. He said, Father, what can I do? I'm not your father, I'm the God of your father. It's an amazing characteristic, or an ideal, of what a parent's voice is supposed to stand for, which is significant enough that the child won't walk past it, but not so overwhelming that the child will be scared and need to step back, to strike that perfect balance. It seems incredibly fitting that in this story, which initiates the process of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the process which we remember on Pesach, and the process which we have to tell our children the story of. On the one night when parents don't outsource educating their children. That's the night when we sit around the table and we have a mitzvah, you should teach it to your children, and for that we build schools and we hire teachers and rebbes. We have a mitzvah, you should tell it to your children at the Pesach Seder, and we're not yet outsourcing that one. We're still doing that one ourselves, Baruch Hashem. On the night when it says, Ani v'lo hashaliach, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I took you out by myself without using any agent, any middle person, any outsourcing. So we do the same. And it's the night when Ofidato Shoben, Aviv Melamdo, when a parent is supposed to communicate with the specific understanding of the nature of the child, of the specific temperament of the child. And this is when we need that magic. This is when we need to have that voice that's significant enough that it is heard, that the other party is attentive to, but at the same time not so soft that it would be ignored. And Moshe Rabbeinu's initiation of the story comes with a reflection on the absolute sweet spot that only a parent's voice is able to some degree to attain. When we speak about resilient families, when we speak about resilient anything, anybody, what are the ingredients of resilience? What enables somebody who goes through something of difficulty to be able to withstand it, to be able to bounce back from it, to be able to deal with adversity, however it strikes, and yet to continue? Social science identifies factors which, Baruch Hashem, I think, speak well for the structure of our community, of the Jewish community, of the Orthodox Jewish community. Factors that build resilience are faith in God. A factor that builds resilience is existing within a strong and supportive structure. When one has supportive family, supportive community, these are intensely important factors in being able to determine resilience. And finally, another critical factor towards resilience is when one has higher and broader goals. If life is defined by the things that are, so to speak, at eye level, the things that we see right here, so if, heaven forbid, one of them is lost or radically changes, then it seems like everything is lost. When one sees things in terms of a bigger picture, that the things that are at eye level are circumstances rather than the purpose itself. A person who sees a bigger goal and a greater goal in life, so that that goal will survive a job change, a trauma, a loss of virtually any kind. So we can talk about all of them. We can talk about faith in God and its importance. It's a staple of our lives. We could talk about living for higher goals and purposes, which is also must be a staple of our lives, such that, again, any change of circumstance won't destroy it. But when we're talking today, I would like to focus on the support system, and not so much on the communal support system, but specifically on the familial support system. We're talking about building resilient families. We should talk about internally what we're able to do, what we're able to do ourselves, what we're able to do ourselves. You know, when we think about loss, traumatic loss, nichum avelim lo aleinu, a person who's in mourning. So we exercise this. What's the idea of nichum avelim, of comforting mourners? Person lo aleinu loses a relative. So what we decide is most comforting is that, Rabbi Schachter spoke a few minutes ago about, they walk the gauntlet, they walk through the shura, people on both sides come and wish them the right words, say to them the right words, offering words of comfort. The people come, many people come to visit, to converse. So we know that there's a lot of wisdom and there's a lot of therapeutic value that could be present in all of that. It would seem that at the core of Nichum Avelim is a simple concept that one may have lost something big, there may be a certain void, but all is not lost. When others come, so then the person understands what they have. That there's a shift from just focusing on the space of what is lost to understand what they have. There's a halacha that says that in Avil, lo aleinu, when one loses a relative, they're not allowed to eat Suda Rishona, the first meal. They can't eat Mishalo. They can't eat of their own. What we call the Sudas Havra'ah, the meal which is supposed to somehow restore the Avil to a certain degree. We're sometimes, very machmir, like if an Avil will get up and make themselves a cup of coffee, we seem to sometimes view that as like a capital offense of some kind. It's not a halacha for the whole week. People do it, they send food the whole week. It's a beautiful thing. It's part of this. It's an expansion of this. But the fundamental din is Suda Rishona Mishalo. You can't have the first meal of your own. And again, in a certain sense, that's what's being legislated. The person lost something, they face a gap. And what we have to make sure is that now they feel what they have, that there's someone there that's looking out for them and providing it for them. In Rishonim, in some of the early commentaries, they interpret a famous verse this way. The Posek says, Bonim atem Hashem Elokechem. You are children to Hashem your God. Lo siskodedu lo sasimu korcha b'neinechem lames. Don't tear your flesh. Don't pull out your hair over a loss. So what does that mean? You're children of God, and therefore you shouldn't do this. There are different interpretations. Rashi speaks about you have an image of God, you shouldn't scar it, whatever the grief. But others amongst the Rishonim say that the idea is that the person could feel that they've lost everything. That they lost a relative, somebody who's dear to them. And we tell them, Bonim atem Hashem Elokechem. You lost something significant. But every human being, we're all children of God, and God cares about us. So, in a sense, a mitigating factor to loss is to recognize who we still have. And that's a critical tool of resilience. As people face difficulty, as people face challenge, to understand who they have. It's there for traumatic loss. But traumatic loss isn't just where a person in one's life disappears. Sometimes where it's faith in a person that disappears. Sometimes when it's a person's own self-confidence, own identity of self, that to some degree seems to have eroded or been lost. Like with many of the confusing issues that young people, and not such young people, face today, where we lose our bearings. For them, for us, for such situations, the idea that there are significant anchors, strong handrails that the person is still able to hold on to, that they're indeed not left alone. That's critical. It's critical for the person to be able to not just maintain resilience, but go beyond. I read once many years ago a fascinating piece, a fascinating article. It was an article in the I guess around here you have to say the New York Times. In other places you say the Times. Right, but here, right, this was an article in the New York Times where they as they were doing the genome sequencing, they identified a resilience gene. That if a person has this gene, so to speak, that's on, they would be more likely to be able to bounce back from trauma. Interesting, yeah? So we say, okay, here's how you build resilient families. Go to a lab, right, and get them to switch your gene sequence. No, listen to what they discovered. They said that resilience gene, in fact, is impactful. With two people with identical circumstances, one has the gene, one doesn't have the gene, there will be a difference. But the gene, or the difference made by the gene, is completely compensated for in terms of resilience if the person has someone to whom they feel that they're able to turn. Two people coming from the same context. They did study, the story featured a pair of twins who were not identical twins, who had all the same context and everything else, but one had it and one didn't have it. And the ability that someone has where they feel they have someone to turn to as they're experiencing the trauma, the difficulty, erased the impact of the gene, which means that what we could do for each other by being there for each other, where the person feels that they have someone to whom they can share, they can express what's going on, what's their feeling, what's in their mind, what they're going through, is the ultimate solution. It overcomes whatever internal deficiencies we might have. And that tells us that our obligation, I wouldn't use a lesser term, our obligation for members of our family, and specifically and especially for our children, is to make sure that they feel that they have somebody to turn to. That they're not scared, as in the big heavy voice, oh my goodness, if I tell my parent what I'm struggling with, if I tell them that I just tried this, or that I'm finding myself hooked to that, or that I'm having this question about myself or my identity, they are going to go ballistic. They're going to get angry with me, or they're going to be so confused and so embarrassed, they won't be able to talk to me. So we just then imagine, let's speak always in the positive, if we're beyond that, if we can make it that we can be approached, then we're introducing to their lives the key ingredient, better than the gene, of resilience. My parent is someone who I can turn to when there's something which is on my mind, when there's something that I'm going through. And they won't be fazed. Now, between me and you, of course we'll be fazed. Of course, a child can go through something like that. It could be the first time we encounter it. It could be that even if it's not the first time that we encounter it, but we hoped so much and we tried so hard that it wouldn't go this way, that it wouldn't turn out this way, and all the confusing feelings which parents have when it comes to their children's success or failure. the combination of absolute love and care for the child, and at the same time how it plays into our own, dreams and aspirations, and our desire for a nicely polished trophy, represented by the children. Of course, those are normal human reactions that each and every one of us would have. Ein she'elah. It's not a question, and we're not quote unquote lesser people because of it. It's normal. It's normal, and it's human. But we can't afford to let that be the dominant feature, or even, if possible, not even like a visible feature of how we interact and how we relate. We have to accept it, and we have to say, of course, okay. So I'm so glad that you're telling me about this. It must be incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging to express understanding and to just be welcoming. There's nothing, the Gemara famously says on a verse in Mishlei Daga B'Levishi Shachena, right? So it says when a person has a worry that's on their heart, one of the ways to understand the verse is Yasichen ala acherim. They have to be able to share it with somebody who's, not an anonymous helpline, but a person who you're connected to, who's in with you for the long haul. It's a key element of resilience and a key chova, a key obligation that we have as parents, to be able to create that kind of environment where if our children are going through something, they have somewhere to turn, and that somewhere is me. That somewhere is me. People sometimes feel it's not working. They can't, for whatever reason. People have sometimes a little bit of a history with a specific child. Maybe now they want to try to adjust it, try to make it better. And you can't just snap your fingers and make it all disappear. So we have to think and strategize and say, okay, ideally, every parent is approachable by every child about every possible subject. But sometimes that's just not going to be. It's just not going to happen. And sometimes, this child talks to the mother, this child talks to the father, and there's this dynamic going on. That's okay. So one could be supportive to ensure that they have somewhere to turn. And sometimes, because of whatever history that can't necessarily be rewritten, it's not immediate that either parent is going to be someone that the child is going to confide in. Maybe there's too much fear or resentment or distance built up that it's possible. So then a parent can make sure still that the child has someone, somewhere to turn. They can strategize with their educational framework at who's the teacher, who's the faculty member, who's the counselor that this child connects to, and somehow facilitate that relationship, help that person understand how important they are to this child's future, how much you need them, encourage them, and if necessary, get out of their way. Make sure that is there. But we need it. Everybody needs it. Resilience requires having some place to turn. There are all kinds of things that people, especially the young people in this very, very confusing time, I think somewhere in the title of this lecture was about a crazy world. I think it's fairly accurate to characterize things that way, right? And there are all kinds of things, and everybody seeks company, they seek support. And if in what they're struggling with, they don't feel that they can turn to us, they turn to their peers who are going through the exact same stuff. And not necessarily with solutions or strength, but in fact, to some degree, the opposite. To create that is vital. It's the oxygen of relationships, and it's the core and the key ingredient of in trying to make ourselves approachable, we have to become a person who's comfortable to speak to someone about something. You know, a subject which is never raised, the child will have to imagine, okay, my parent is very compassionate, maybe I can talk to them about that. But perhaps we need to be proactive. Perhaps we need to be proactive. And to some degree, take some leadership to control the narrative. There are challenges which are very predictable from the world around us, things which our kids are hearing about. They're hearing about from the street, they're hearing about it from their peers, they're hearing about it from society around them. It's so often, so many of these confusing things are thrust in our faces. That's the nature of the culture and of the media and everything else, that it's thrust in our faces. So if we want to be that approachable parent, it's very important that we not respond to things with anger, that we make ourselves, to present as if we are the greatest ally. But we also need to be in the sugya. We need to be in the discussion. Child will feel, my parent, I love them. I could turn to them about most things, but I have no idea if I'm going to talk to them about this, about trying this drug or identity questions or things like that. And so we may need to take the lead. Let me not qualify that. We need to take the lead. We need to take the lead in such conversations and find within ourselves educate ourselves a little bit, open the conversation. To open the conversation, and again, it doesn't need to be necessarily that one has a dissertation to give on whatever the particular subject is. If one just raises it. The conversation, once upon a time there was, so to speak, the conversation which parents would have with their children, and go and take a survey, how many parents actually have that conversation with their children? They don't. They're afraid. We are afraid, to some degree, as parents, to raise these things, and we can't be, because why should they learn about it from the alternative sources? It's not sensible. It's not appropriate. And it cuts us off as being an approachable resource. We have, in a certain way, to lead the conversation, to share with understanding to begin with. And it's an irreplaceable role of parents. Irreplaceable is a drop of an exaggeration, because again, sometimes the parent won't do it, so somebody else, hopefully they'll have somebody else meaningful in their lives. But it's a role which parents should play. It's a role which parents should play, which they shouldn't outsource. On the same table, that's the Seder table, which is Ani V'lo HaShaliach, where it's the one night in the year where we're surely fulfilling a table which is like a mizbeach, people sitting and Omrim Olav Divrei Torah, talking about matters of value around the Seder table. We need to lend from that to our regular table, to our dinner table, to our Shabbos table, where things can be discussed, where issues are there to be entertaining, and sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's just, like our family grapples with things, discusses things. Our parent is someone who's going to be able to approach us. Again, very often it's way, way better to do one-on-one when it comes to some of these extremely sensitive matters, just because of the holiness, so to speak, that you still want to have, to maintain the home to something as a sanctuary. But just the idea that we do speak about things is so important to be able to create this dynamic. There's a story which has nothing to do with drugs or identity, but it has to do with this idea of listening. That I just love the story, and I credit it to my wife, who found it and shared it and shares it consistently. And it's such a wonderful, wonderful story. Rabbi Levin was the Tsaric of Jerusalem. He was known as the Tzedaka of Jerusalem. And on a certain Friday afternoon, he walked in to an establishment. It was like a restaurant type, so a restaurant or a club type of an establishment on a Friday afternoon. Rabbi, the Tsaric of Jerusalem, with his hat and his beard and his frock, or his shtreimel already, was Erev Shabbos. He walks in on Erev Shabbos, and he sits down. And he's sitting down, he's looking around. And the proprietor, after a few minutes, he knows who's there, he comes over to him. And he says, like, what's going on? Why is the Rav here on Erev Shabbos? He was used to, people coming and saying, you got to close your store, it's Shabbos, picketing and so on and so forth. Rabbi Levin came and says, I just got in here and I'm sitting and I'm looking at all these people coming through the store. Dafka Friday afternoon, going into Shabbos, they're off. They're coming, they want to eat, they want to buy. It's unbelievable how difficult it must be for somebody to contemplate closing their store for Shabbos. How could you even think about it? Look at this, look at all the activity. It's really, really so hard. Rabbi Levin got up and he went to daven mincha and Kabbalah Shabbos. And after Shabbos, this fellow came to Rabbi Levin and he said, I closed my store. You're the first person who approached me and understood the difficulty of the decision that I was facing. That's the story. That's the voice, the right voice, the approachable voice, the voice of understanding that will ultimately get through, ultimately get us through. Critical ingredients for resilient families, like for resilient individuals, is that they have someone to turn to. And it's our task, our job, to be that someone. Part of being that someone is that they know that we're there for them unconditionally, that we're approachable, that nothing they will say to us will faze us, that we'll be so angry or embarrassed or whatever else it is that we won't be able to continue to be there for them as they face us. And part of building that approachability is also that we remove our heads from our 20th century or from our little bubble of our own lives and try to be able to be there in theirs, in their struggles and what they're inevitably, the questions and challenges which they inevitably are dealing with. And then, Be'ezus Hashem, we will be the ones for them to turn to. We will be the ones who will be, Kollel Shel Aviv, the voice of the father, the mother, the voice of the parent. That's just the right pitch. Just the right pitch. Taken seriously and not overwhelming. And we'll be able to have what Eliyahu Hanavi, the Malach of the Seder, what his prophecy, which we'll read, the last words before Pesach, Shabbos, after Shabbos Hagdol, Hine Anaychi Shaleach Lachem, thank you as Eliyahu Hanavi, Lifnei Vayim Hashem Hagdol V'Anayra, behold, I am sending you Eliyahu Hanavi before the great day comes. That's Gadol, that's great and awesome. V'Heshiv Le'Lavos Albanim, Le'Banim Alavosam. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the parents. It'll take all of us to tango. It'll take all of us to tango, but with that openness, Be'ezus Hashem, we will come together and we'll be Zocha Be'ezus Hashem to the kind of communication that will build resilient children, resilient families, and Be'ezus Hashem, unending nachas of each and every of us.